Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another edition of Gavin Richard Presents. Welcome to the ride, y'all. In the next hour or so, we're going to be interviewing Judge Joe Brown. As in TV's Judge Joe Brown, I'm about to call his office right now as we speak. Just give us one moment.
Yes, sir.
Yes, how you doing, Judge Joe?
All right.
All right, thank you for joining us on another episode of Gavin Richard Presents. There's a lot going on, Judge. First off, how you been?
I'm doing fine, young man. I've been making it okay.
Well, that's very good. That's good. And how's the weather up there in Tennessee?
It's getting variable. It was hot as the devil a few days ago. Now it's dropped down to a more moderate thing. Let's see. Using the cell phone, it is 64 here in Memphis right now.
Okay, that's not
2 days ago, it was almost 90.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's been here in Louisiana. It's much more humid, but it's not as bad. It's been raining all week, so it's like in the 70s, I believe. So
Well, it's humid here too.
Yeah.
Let's see. I believe it's 90% humidity according to the weather report, and it's raining. So it is what it is.
Right.
But heck, it's supposed to jump upstairs. It's at 80.
Right.
And then it goes up from there.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's going on?
Well, Judge, what would you like to start with? I guess I know we weren't going to get in the Cosby case today, but I did want to ask you quickly, have you had a chance to watch these the Senate Judiciary Committee hearings involving Kavanaugh? If you could give your take on that.
Well, I will check that out later after all of the jumping up and down histrionics and posing for the camera takes place and see what we've got. But I would admonish people to understand that in America, we have some very sacrosanct principles. A person is innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal matter. In a civil matter, he is presumed innocent until that presumption is overcome by a preponderance of the evidence. If it's a draw, you can't believe either side over the other. The rule is that the presumption stays. So in other words, if it's just a swearing match, he said and she said, and nobody gets the stronger point, since it's a civil proceeding, then what the American principle is ain't nothing happened. It was a waste of time.
Right. So tie goes to the runner.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Bill Cosby didn't get that luxury, unfortunately.
Now, here's the thing with Bill Cosby.
Yeah.
See, from my perspective as a former trial judge and as a criminal defense lawyer, I see a lot of error in this case. And on an appellate level, it's going to be whether or not an appellate court thinks it's sufficiently prejudicial to set it aside, the verdict aside. The other thing is that there are multiple appellate levels that will be involved, and it isn't over until the fat lady sings, and that is until the last appellate court that may either accept or have automatic jurisdiction says what it has to say.
Right.
So as far as it goes about conviction standing, we've got a super aircraft carrier that's 1,100 feet long, 256 feet wide, weighs 110,000 tons, has somewhere around 6,000 sailors and airmen on board. It's called a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in the United States Navy, and it's named after the late Senator John B. Stennis. It was named after him and launched before he died. Now, John B. Stennis started off as a prosecutor and then a judge down in Mississippi. And one of his more infamous cases is he got a conviction against 3 black men for supposedly killing a plantation owner. And he knew, and it was clear in the proof, that the only evidence he had was their alleged confession. They were hung by hooks and literally lashed with a whip until their backs bled in order to coerce the confessions from them. But he used them. So that bespeaks the American system. And the government spent $13.8 billion of our money on that aircraft carrier. It just got commissioned recently, and it's named after a racist whose most famous case was the conviction he got down in Mississippi seeking the death penalty of 3 black men who were coerced into confessing by literally taking an old cat of nine tails and whipping them until they bled as they were tied to a stake.
Right.
So that's the background to the American system when it gets inequitably applied. Now, as black people, we have a problem with that, obviously. But what's going on right now, and let me give you the basic bottom line on this. Some of the people who are too deep into hashtag Me Too and feminism are trying to turn this into a war on manhood and men. If they get too deep into that and provoke a backlash, they are not going to win, and they will not like where they find themselves, because what's going on now reflects the realities of power and dominance with the planetary apex predator that kills better than any other animal on the planet and kills a lot of himself in the process. So you don't want there to be a war between man and woman. And in any event, you need men and women for families.
Right.
Men and women running families is a healthy thing. The economy has its basic unit as the family. The social structure of teaching, acculturation, and socialization is based on the family. And politics and governments, city, county, state, and federal, are all based on a super extended family background. So you screw that up, which is already in jeopardy, and you've got a real live mess. The economy's hurt, the educational level is hurt, social peace, dignity, and order are destroyed, and you've got a big mess. So we do not need to turn this into a man versus woman thing, which some are trying to do as hard as they can.
Right.
I just looked at a tweet where they said men have had power long enough all around the world that they've abused women, and women will have their day when they take over. And the question is, do you really believe women are going to coerce men to do any damn thing we don't want to do?
No.
See, the truth of the matter is that women get protected by men who have some connection to them. And if it's not one of your women, but becomes one of your women, and by women I mean your mother, sisters, aunts, grandmother, co-workers, secretaries, and female friends and acquaintances, what happens is there is one motive that all straight men have had throughout history: the pursuit, acquisition, and enjoyment of something only human women possess. Now, I'll be polite and won't mention it, but anybody's imagination could suggest the answer. Now, that is the key. When that is at stake, men do all kinds of stuff. If women just sit down and say, okay, I'm going to make you, and you don't have that kind of relationship, you can't make any man do anything he does not want to do, unless you sit there and start evoking an essentially male legal system to deal with him, and then that's only something that'll go so far.
Right. So Judge, I want to ask you, do you think it's fair, though, that in light of that, when the Me Too movement and the accusations, like against Kavanaugh and Cosby and other men have come out, do you think it's fair that they can go back 30, 20, or 10 years, or even longer than that? I think with Bill Cosby, there were accusations from the 1960s. Do you think that's fair that people should bring that up?
Well, let me give you a contrary thing. It's not bragging, but I had an instance where a woman came up to me and she was very friendly and she wanted to resume the relationship. So I'm going, what relationship? And she got mad. You don't remember? And apparently 25 some years ago, we had slept together. So I'm going, what in the devil? it's like, I mean, I didn't offend her. She wanted more, but bottom line was I didn't even remember. You see,
Yeah.
I've had people come up and tell me stuff that I did that was positive that happened 50 years ago. I don't remember. And I can remember stuff about friends I've run into after not seeing them for 35 years and told them, they said, did I do that? I said, yeah, man, that was cool. Man, I don't even remember that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I've also run into people that it's like if there were 15 folk standing around looking at something, you'd get 14 differing versions of something close to the same thing. And one somebody has got a version of facts that doesn't even come close to everybody else. It doesn't mean that they're wrong. It just means that there's a difference.
Right.
I have a friend who was in psychology. He invited me to watch him run this thing he always runs. He got 5 people in the class who were taking theater arts and were into acting. So they cooked up this thing where there was going to be a disruption of class and somebody was going to pull out one of these old-time narrow black plastic cones, you know, the thin kind that narrow down to real thin.
Yeah.
And the person was supposed to jump up in a quarrel with somebody else, and somebody that's also in on this is going to say, look out, he's got a knife. So we had some of the campus police in on this. So after this disruptive scene, they come over to take a statement. There are 65 to 70 students in this room, and all but 3 or 4 of them described some kind of knife they saw, ranging from a buck sheath knife to a switchblade. And it was a black plastic cone. One person in the whole room said, I thought it was a black plastic cone. Now, that person was the odd man out, but he happened to be right. But all these other people that saw something, you know, they were dead wrong. It was a matter of suggestivity. See, right. One of the things that nobody's talking about, and I'm not getting down on anybody's sexual orientation, but there is this problem that you have straight people, heterosexual people, you've got bisexual people in the middle, and you've got homosexual people on the other side. Now, there are some people who are bisexual, typically, in this case, we're talking about women, who get in a situation where they basically do things that they are trying to do to get an advantage. It doesn't work out, and they have the equivalent of buyer's remorse, so then somebody starts talking to them about it's not your fault, you shouldn't feel bad about yourself, it was no good dog of a man that did it. They start being convinced, and in their mind start shifting any memory around. So what they come up with is a concrete assessment that I got taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get later on, we get this thing of I'm angry, I'm going to get revenge, I've got to be part of the cause. So they may even have an earnest recollection, but it's wrong. Now, some people say that false accusations are infrequent, but I beg to differ. I've been in the criminal justice system 45 years, one way or the other. Either is a prosecutor, public defender, head public defender, private defense lawyer, or a criminal court judge. And I can think of, I've counted in my mind at least 30 separate instances over those years where I have represented somebody, or it has turned out later after they've been in front of me in court where somebody admitted they lied for some reason or another, mm-hmm. or the person's been exonerated, or you're sitting there with a client who sex crimes wants to talk to because they are the suspect in a rape case, sat there because there was a big problem going on and we were waiting for almost an hour and a half, and we just happened to be sitting under a clock on the wall in the detective bureau. And one of these detectives picked up this phone that just kept ringing and handed it to the detective. We were there to see who I know. He looked, he picked it up, got to talking and said, yes, oh really? Looked over at me and my client, shook his head, went back. Well, I tell you what, thank you, ma'am. We'll send the squad car out to take your report. I'm sorry what happened to you happened. He hung the phone up. He said, your client can go. He said, she's claimed he raped her 3 separate occasions. claimed he just ran out of the building less than 5 minutes ago after raping her for 25 minutes or 30 minutes. And you guys have been sitting here for an hour and a half, so obviously it's not you. You can go on about your business.
Right, because he was there the whole time this was going on.
Yeah, so this is just one lawyer and his clients, or one judge and the defendants he's got in front of him. And if just that one individual is associated with at least 30 instances where there is a false accusation or a problematical one, then it explains what you get in the system, wherein the system thinks rape is one of the most horrible crimes, but they get so many cases where there is all of this boo-hoo, I got raped, etc. It sounds horrible, and then you find out once they settle down and the reality sinks in, I didn't mean to do what I did. Well, what did you do? He told me he was going to pay my rent if I gave him some. He didn't, so I said I was going to fix it. Or we got a rape trial going on, and the victim says that she was raped in the backseat of a convertible. But while she's on the stand testifying, she says she and the guy became worried that she was getting pregnant and she didn't want to have a baby by a rape. So what she does is climb up off of him and with herself bare from the waist down, runs to her car, which is the way they measured it on the ground, about 50 yards away from his car. And she unlocks her door, goes in the glove compartment, reaches and fishes around in there and runs back with 2 prophylactics, and then climbs back in the car, puts it on him, and gets back on top, and that's supposed to be a rape.
Yeah, sounds like a hell of a Friday night.
Everybody like, oh, wow. You know, now sometimes it happens. It is absolutely horrible. It's like I said, the worst crime. I had another situation. The lawyer, private lawyer, wasn't very good at what he was doing because he did a lot of advertising and had a lot of clients, but you know, he had no real trial experience. So in the middle of it, he had forgotten to do certain things, and some relatives said, but wait a minute, we brought in the records from the military and Colonel so-and-so, such and such. So the state objected, but I let the evidence anyway. You know what it was? When he had been arrested, when he was jogging down the street, and a woman came out of nowhere, started screaming and shrieking and running down the middle of the street, hollering and flagged down a cop and said, that's him, he raped me, you know. And we go to trial, but at the time she was supposed to have been raped, he was in Germany at the Fulda Gap in an M60 tank.
Right.
So goodness,
he had an alibi.
Like 9,000 miles away.
Right.
So it's like, okay, fine. That got cleared up. But I mean, it was really sounding horrible.
Right. Right.
So, I mean, those are just anecdotes from my personal experience. So when you just factor that in, you know, they've got 10 criminal courts and, you know, that try everything up to first-degree murder cases. Tennessee has the 5th largest, Memphis, Tennessee had the 5th largest criminal jurisdiction statewide in the United States, behind LA, New York, Chicago, Dallas, Memphis, Miami, and Houston in that order, and then Detroit. And, you know, you think about what's going on with this and you say that's got to be a representative sample. So it is a problem. So people look at this stuff and they're suspect. Now you got a jury conviction, which stands for itself, but there are some problems with that just from the legal perspective. There's a Fifth Amendment problem in here that just stands out like there's a neon sign going off around it.
Right. I wanted to get to that, Judge. When I'm looking at the Hollywood Reporter, this is an article that was made in 2015. It's about the judge, the federal judge that unsealed the Cosby deposition. His name was District Court Judge Eduardo Rebreno. And he agreed to open up court records, I believe, from a Freedom of Information Act. And he had released it to the public, which the New York Times had filed. But what's interesting is that when this document was sealed, Cosby's defense team argued that resealing it would affect, others, his case. and they wanted to stop it from further embarrassment. And the circuit court justices, while they did not reseal the Cosby court documents, they said that the federal judge was wrong. They admonished him and stated, "It has no basis in our jurisprudence regarding the conditions for modifying a protective order as set forth in Pansy and its progeny. Moreover, the term public moralist is vague and undefined." And in fact, Judge Rebrano called Bill Cosby a public moralist, and said based off of the way he conducted himself, he decided he wanted to release those documents. But
yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying for our viewers.
It goes deeper than that. See, you have under the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, you have an absolute right to be free from self-incrimination. In other words, a defendant in a criminal matter cannot be compelled to give evidence against himself.
Correct.
In a civil matter, a civil defendant can be compelled to give evidence against himself. Now, you see, there was always the possibility of a criminal prosecution when this matter came up civilly. And what had happened was that the defense lawyers for Cosby raised the issue of Fifth Amendment. No, he doesn't have to respond to these depositions because he may, when in fact he does wish to exercise his Fifth Amendment and be free from self-incrimination. But what happens is the DA's office, and that's important, the office that was occupied by an elected DA, says the office does not intend to go forward with this prosecution. Therefore, the Fifth Amendment did not apply, so he could be compelled to answer truthfully on the interrogatories. And what he admitted to was having sex with the woman. He claimed it was consensual in the interrogatories, or the deposition rather. But he said, I gave her a Benadryl pill, one Benadryl pill that you can buy across the counter. I got a big bottle in my kitchen for allergies. Right. And if you took a handful of them, yeah, you might knock yourself out, but not one. But
yeah, it was a 1.5, I believe. Yeah.
1.5. But in any event, I take 4 at a time. But in any event, what happens, and remember, this woman isn't 5'3", 5'4". She's 6'1", 6'2", a basketball player, built like a man. Now, anyway. So what happens is that, well,
no, go ahead.
Pictures worth 1,000 words. But in any event, what happens, Steve, is he gives a truthful admission during the deposition of this, which the Fifth Amendment would have otherwise entitled him to remain silent upon. Now, so far, so good. They settled the case and the record is sealed. If we left it at that, that would be fine. But there's a new person campaigning to be the DA who promises to open it back up. So when they come back up, they open it back up to facilitate criminal prosecution. But the problem is see, you had one DA that said no and the other one says yes. But here's the problem. It's not really the individual who does it. It's the office. So when the DA is elected, he becomes the DA in terms of an office. Like when the judge becomes elected as judge, he's no longer I, he's the court. He's not me, he's the court. It's not I am John Jones, DA, I'm the DA, and I represent the DA's office. So when the DA's office offers immunity, it cannot come back in and revoke that immunity and attempt to rely upon the statement they got from Cosby, induced by the finding that he had no criminal liability. Therefore, he could be compelled to make a statement against evidence. See, that's fundamental unfairness. Mm-hmm. See, so that's one of the primary issues. So if you throw that out, you've got basically a problem with no case. Now, we've got right now president of the NRA and famous right-wing character, former Lieutenant Colonel Ollie North. He got put in that same situation. He got run through the racket, or through the bush with the Congress, who promised him immunity, and then they turned around, prosecuted him, and convicted him. But the appellate court set the conviction aside because of the same factor. He had been induced to testify on a promise of immunity, so they couldn't go back on it.
Right.
So all of the evidence that stemmed from that had to be set aside, thrown out, which required the conviction to be reversed or at least sent back for a new trial. Right. The other thing is proof of other crimes that's disturbing. And I went through big things as a trial judge and as a defense lawyer about proof of other crimes. Now, proof of other crimes is generally forbidden. Proof of other crimes is inadmissible if the defendant does not take the stand and testify, in which case proof of other crimes can be used for rebuttal purposes. But on the other hand, if he does not testify, the state can't use it in their case in chief unless it is for certain limited purposes. One of them is for identification. One of them is for access. One of them is to show by mode, manner, or fashion of something that there is circumstantial evidence that this is the person you need to bring in and deal with crime. It cannot be used to establish proclivity. It is absolutely forbidden in American law to bring in evidence before a person gets on a stand and testify, so the jury can get the opportunity to convict him for other offenses than what he's on trial for. If he testifies, proof of other crimes is admissible as a matter of impeaching the credibility of his testimony. But Bill Cosby did not testify.
Okay, Judge, to stop you right there. So we know Bill Cosby didn't testify and the prior bad act witnesses. Then why do you think this judge would allow this obviously unethical and illegal behavior in the courtroom?
Well, it's not unethical. It's just in error.
Okay.
So you're sitting up there and you are in the position of being an umpire at a baseball game. Was it a strike or was it a ball? And, strike a ball or inning 1 or 2, when the score is even, no big deal. Gets to the top of the ninth, 2 outs, bases loaded, last batter up, and the game's tied or the team is 1 run behind, bases loaded, and the umpire calls a strike and other people say it was a ball, then you got controversy. Mm-hmm. So you're on the hot seat, so to speak. And a lot of times it involves some complex law. So let's be candid. Some people are smarter than others, and that goes for judges too. So you're the judge and you're sitting up there and you go, oh, wow, what the devil? So you rule in the safe way. Let's rule for the people I think are going to vote for me next time. Let's go where the wind's blowing, because you see, you've got judges and DAs who depend upon what they do to pay their mortgage notes, put money aside for their children to go to college, plan for the next vacation, get their wives or spouses some gift or get a new car or something like that, or put money away for retirement. So that's their job. And private practice is a vicious creature. Mm. So what are they going to do if they're no longer a judge? Because being a judge is all kinds of problems. You got other judges that want to get back at you because they didn't like you because, you made a bad name for them, or there's a lawyer that you got on one time who's now a judge, or you get rookies who are on the bench just young while they want to prove a point. So everybody's trying to shoot at you. So it's not good.
Right. That's just like, well, that's actually like with Stephen O'Neill from what they reported. He ran against the original district attorney, and that district attorney, they wanted his testimony, I believe, in the preliminary hearing when he said that he promised not to prosecute Bill Cosby. And then the judge, he would not let that in, and he had ran against this former prosecutor, Bruce Castor.
Well, yeah, but see, It's in the record. That's the testimony under oath, even though the judge said he wouldn't consider it. What happens is that effectively for appellate purposes, that's a proper proof, which it could have been considered. It's in the record. Proof from the previous district attorney is I promised not to prosecute. That's where the Fifth Amendment goes south. So another prosecutor can come back in and revoke that.
Right. Wow.
Because the defendant relied to the principle is detrimental reliance, which is most apparent in civil matters, but in criminal cases, it's also there. I relied to my detriment upon this representation. I should not be penalized because I, in the civil courts, relied upon this representation, and somebody came back in and tried to rescind it.
Mm-hmm.
Or revoke it.
Right.
See, that's the American system, in spite of all of its foibles and problems. The system per se is fundamentally fair, but it's like the rules of a ball game. You can cheat. Like cards, you can cheat at cards. The rules are the same for everybody. The rules for poker are the same for everybody, but you can cheat. Same thing with blackjack. You can cheat. Same thing with dice. You put loaded dice up there, although the rules are you just throw and, depending upon what you throw. But, there are all kinds of ways of cheating. So the point is the system has all these checks and balances to keep people honest. Now, there is a pressure between getting what happens in a court to match what the popular passion is. But then there are 430 some years of American law to prevent that from happening because it's mob rule. Now, let's get an example of another bad thing, which is a whole lot of women got burned at the stake at one time in the country's history because of unfounded rumors or accusations that the person was a witch. There's no such thing as witchcraft. But just the accusation she was a witch got women burned at the stake. So nowadays we're going to resurrect that thing that's 400 years old. We're going to go back to an accusation in a, quote, witch hunt condemns a person?
Yeah.
Or are we going to say we have gone for 230 years on a presumption of innocence, not to be removed because it stands as a presumption and a witness in favor of the defendant, unless it's done so beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal matter or by the preponderance of the evidence in a civil matter.
Right. Well, they got some witches out here, Judge, like Gloria Allred.
Well, Gloria Allred, I've met her, and she had some glasses of wine, and she was gushing about what she was doing. And she's got a little proclivity for going around in the name of being right as a crusading lawyer and getting women to convince them that they've done wrong. One of her little games is she threatens these people with exposure.
Right.
And she gets settlements to keep a client quiet, and she gets fees out of this.
Yeah, she was doing that with Cosby. She wanted him to pay $100 million.
Yeah, and see what happens is that she wouldn't have a leg to stand on in an actual action, but she can get the fees out, and she also perceives herself along with her daughter, and they're into that man-hating category, see. They think they have a cause, which many women who are feminists will tell you that the ends are so important that the means doesn't make any difference. And if you've got to sacrifice an innocent man in the name of the cause, then that's just, a sacrificial lamb.
Right. It's like that editor from Teen Vogue that made that remark.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there are a bunch of others. There's I read some on Twitter this morning. And that's not good because that allows mob rule. And there's a corollary to that too. Is what's happening in Texas. I tell people down there, I said, you are upset about the Cosby situation. You think it's white supremacy. And this is just what they've had throughout the history of America. Anytime a black man gets too high, they bring him down for dealing with somebody's white woman or somebody that looks like one. And there's always an accusation of rape. Scottsboro boys or Jack Johnson, who Trump part. That's what it was all about.
Right.
The Mann Act. They created the Mann Act because Jack Johnson thumbed his nose at America and had a white woman or a white wife. And what happened is they were on their way to Europe and they crossed the corner of Georgia, which did not recognize black and white marriage. So when they got off the train for a stop, take a break, they got immediately arrested for transporting across state lines. They went across the corner of Georgia, a woman for illicit purposes, his wife. So he got convicted, he escaped, and I think his mother did him wrong because she begged him to come back because she wanted to see him so bad she was dying. So when he came back, he had to flatten the ear in the penitentiary. So that's what Trump pardoned him for.
Right.
Jack Johnson, for a lot of black folk at one point in this country's history, was, he was the role model because he was doing it. He even did this thing where he bought a race car and challenged the preeminent white race car driver by a guy named Barney Oldfield to a race, and it was a draw. So, you know, black folk had been told that blacks can't drive or handle complicated, fast machinery like a car.
Right. Well,
but I mean, it made us stand up and be proud. But anyway, I'm glad Trump pardoned it.
Right. Jack Johnson, I'm glad you brought that up. When President Obama was, well, even before he was president, when he was a senator and George Bush was president, I believe President Obama had abstained from the vote.
It was 99 senators on the record voting for a recommendation of a pardon, with one president abstaining, and that was Barack Obama. In the U.S. House of Representatives, it was a 100% unanimous consent on recommending him for a pardon.
So, but I mean, so it passed. So by him abstaining, you think he just didn't want to do it?
Well, he got invited to be the keynote speaker for the 40th anniversary of the Dr. King assassination here at the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis. Hillary showed up, Newt Gingrich showed up, John McCain showed up, Black Caucus showed up. The invitee to be the keynote speaker didn't even respond and stood everybody up.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned.
He looks like us, but we get too often into appearances. I don't want to provoke a firestorm.
Yeah.
But the man grew up in one of the richest households on earth. His daddy was an Indonesian oil baron, and also, interestingly enough, in light of him being called the Drone Ranger by virtue of assassination by drone, his stepdaddy / adopted daddy ran the death squads for the Indonesian government. So he was the Gestapo, the head man that did the killing and did contract killings for the CIA in the Southwest Pacific area. Wow. His grandmother, who was vice president of a bank in Hawaii, now it came out some time ago that the CIA monies for the Southwest Pacific were channeled through her. She introduced Obama's stepdaddy to her daughter, and her daughter married. Oh. And it works out because of the oil connection. He had been executive vice president, international executive vice president for Standard Oil, the predecessor of Exxon. They wanted to get into the Indonesian oil reserves. They couldn't under American law. So what they did is they fronted Lolo Soetoro, a.k.a. Daddy, to Barry Soetoro. And he set up an oil company in Indonesia, and by virtue of the fact that he ran the death squads for the government, he didn't have any competition.
Right.
So our president grew up in one of the richest households on earth, and when daddy died, I mean, if you adopt somebody before they're 2 years old, you're the daddy, you raised them.
Right.
He left him as 1/3 beneficiary of all of the assets and such for what was at the time one of the 10 or 15 richest men on earth. So paradoxically, though we think Trump, the richest man to ever be U.S. president, was Barack Obama. And last year, Business Insider reported his net income after taxes at over $200 million. Wow. That's higher than that's higher than Trump's. Is computed to be, being a billionaire. That's a lot of money to have as a net income. First off, who the devil would show a net income and get put in a tax bracket like that?
Not too many.
No, but there it is. So, I mean, it's a whole bunch of deception going on and appearances. But women have a right to be free from being done wrong in the workplace. For years and years, I've told people, don't dip your wick in the company ink. Don't try to date somebody you work with. Don't try to hit on the people that work for you.
Right.
Stay away. Don't deal with anybody that you pay.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, I understand. Tavis Smiley's learning that lesson.
Yeah, well, see, there's another context that we have to understand there is a move afoot on the East Coast to change the categories of rape, to add a new one. Guess what it is? It's called rape by seduction. In other words, if you take your lady friend out, you have a nice evening, wine, candlelight, dinner, movie or theater, walk in the park, my place, your place, and, you know, kissy, huggy, feely, and things led to things, and you do the wild thing, then these people want that to be declared rape by seduction, because if you seduce a woman, that's supposed to be rape.
Right.
So most women would say, you have lost your bloody mind.
Right.
Or one woman put it, replied, I think you got that tweet. One woman replied to something I did, says, it can reverse on women. What if your date comes and you open up your fur coat when he walks in and all you got on is fur coat? You know, does that become rape by seduction and you're guilty?
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
I've always thought,
hard.
right. I've always thought, like, for instance, I'll never forget, I think with the Jameis Winston situation, when he was at Florida State, what happens if both of them are drunk? I mean, can he claim, and they have sex, can he claim he was raped?
Well, what man is going to claim a woman raped him?
Right. No one.
No, that's just preposterous. How you even, excuse me, I'll be crude. How you going to get a hard on if you get raped?
Yeah,
it doesn't happen.
Right.
I suppose, I guess she could put a strap on or something like that, but I mean, we won't go down that kinky thing there, but no, that's just crazy. And see, part of this is you got the beta boy, soy boy type, no telling what they'll come up with, being sycophants for all of that. Women have their rights. Everybody's got their rights. But sometimes in a person's exercise of rights, you don't want to get absurd about it.
Mm-hmm. This is right. I'm glad you mentioned all of this, especially with the change of laws, because I've seen it, like with Cosby, they've in certain states, because of the case, they've actually extended the statute of limitations. I believe in California, there's no statute of limitations anymore on rape. And it almost reminds me of the O.J. Simpson case when they changed domestic violence laws in the country.
Well, let me say this. I worked in Hollywood for 15 years, and at the end of my second year, I became aware of something that caused me to get a lady friend to come in from Mississippi. And I said, you know, you're trying to aspire to do certain things. I want to hire you for two purposes: public relations. And she wound up working for Rupert Murdoch. Right. But she was good. She saved the show. They're trying to kill it because they embezzled money from it. But in any event, what happened was we came up with this idea. Said, look, they're trying to set me up. So we came up with a fictitious woman, created a fictitious woman, and we got notarized affidavits with them, sealed the envelope, and had it filed, and Mark received and got a receipt from Human Resources with the studio, right? Uh-huh. And then she went and told this certain person's wife that this fictitious person had told her that I was bothering her, okay? Uh-huh. So we filed an affidavit detailing that, had it marked, sealed, got a receipt for it with Human Resources with the studio. We did a few of these, and then guess what? These clowns come up with a supposed notarized statement from this fake person. So when they brought that out to confront me with it, I said, okay, bring the following documents over, or the envelopes over from Human Resources. I said, would you look at the date stamped on them? Here's my receipts for these. Say, okay, you notice all of these are in front of us now. Open. So they went and said, oh, God, he caught us.
You caught him.
You caught him. Dead to rights. But you see, they do that. So, I mean, and you have to take this context. What prompted me was at the time I went out there, I was a bachelor, all right?
Right.
So, Hollywood, you know, I grew up in L.A., but, you know, I'm in, you know, big hotel, big party, you know. and they're fine women around, and I'm dancing. So I remember at one little affair, this woman came over to me later. She says, you know, what is with that guy over there? I said, who are you talking about? She pointed somebody out. I said, what do you mean? As soon as I got through slow dancing with you, he came over and told me that it might be worth big money to me if I'd say that you did something to me. I told him he was full of it. So I went back to each one of these women that I danced with, fast or slow, at this affair, and they told me, yeah, that guy came over and said, would I be willing to say that you did something bad over here? So you see, they do this, and I'm sure I've talked to other straight black males involved in Hollywood, and they've had similar experiences.
Right.
And I'm sure that they did this with Cosby because at one time, you know, the thing was groupies, sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Right.
Sex, drugs, basketball, you know, NBA, sex, drugs, NFL, sex, drugs, Major League Baseball.
Right.
Or NHL, National Hockey League stuff. You know, it went on like that. Or sex, drugs, in the movies. Right. Sex, drugs, and TV. Dad. So it is what it is, and that was the culture. I mean, I remember they did this thing which bears out some of the accusations some of the feminists have. We were in where my studios hit and where my show's headquarters were at the studio. It's on Sunset at Van Ness in LA, about a block and a half west of the 101 freeway. And they were going to renovate the place. So when they did, they took the sheetrock off the walls, and they discovered these stairwells that were going down to an underground tunnel that had branches on it. So when we went down and looked, they had all these yellow pieces of paper, yellowing paper that had been taped on the walls. And the office had been the famous Cecil B. DeMille's office, and there were directions to the bungalows of the various starlets like Theta Bara and Jean Harlow. Rita Garbo, and all of that bunch.
Marilyn
Monroe. Down, there was an indication up. Now there's nothing up there. It's just blanked off, but it's a staircase you could see that was ended. We'd go up to the bungalow so he could go get laid. Nobody would know it. So it's been going on for years. But now Hollywood has switched orientation. So most of it is not heterosexual casting couch. It's homosexual casting couch.
Yeah.
So it's, they invited me to parties out there when I first got out. And I said, no, this is a trap. And then I started noticing that they had a different orientation than I did. No problem, that's their business, but you know, it wasn't any point me being at a party when there's the boys looking at you rather than the girls.
Right. Yeah. If you're not comfortable with it, you know, don't force that. You know, I've had people that told me where they've been asked by like this gay friend to go to a gay club. And he's like, no, I don't want to do that. And they say, well, why not? He's like, because I said no. You know, don't force me if I don't want to do something. You know, and go to that. But I feel like we, you know, the age we're living in, they really try to force and compel that on you when you watch TV.
Well, yeah, they try to push it. And see, for 15 years, every day I went into the studio, it would be one unending war. Like, would you tell those folk up there in the control room to stop that? I can hear them. It ain't gonna be no day like that. So you fire me if you don't like it, but you ain't got the clout. You're not high enough on the food chain to fire me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so drop dead. You know, this was an ongoing, you know, daily conversation type thing.
Yeah.
So it was a real war.
Right.
I mean, and I believe in fundamental fairness, but I would just say this: they weren't trying to treat me fairly.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised. They were shocked that what I did had the impact it did. But I tell you, to give you a clue as to what they were doing about it. Now, if you're on the A list, B list, or C list, that's because your studio puts you on there. There actually are lists, and the studios send out notices of who they consider on what list. I was on none of them. But the interesting thing about it is that it ought to be based on your ratings, right?
Right.
Okay, Ellen DeGeneres was on an A-list, but the fact of the matter is, in all of these years she's been at TV, not one of her shows has not been canceled before the probation period was up. Some seasons they've given her 3 shows, and her ratings are just abysmal. They're way down at the bottom.
Right.
And they canceled the shows, but they put her on the A-list. Why? Okay, they've got Oprah on the A-list, they got Dr. Phil on the A-list, got Joe Brown on nothing. But here's the truth of the matter. For the last 3 years, every day of the week, I beat Phil in the ratings. Every week of the season, I beat Oprah in the ratings. Mm-hmm. When we were all in the same unit with Judge Judy, and half the time I was trampling on her heels, but they kept changing her ratings method so she would stay a step ahead of me. They just did not want a straight black man to be number 1 in the ratings for television.
Right. Judge, something interesting too that you bring that up with Ellen DeGeneres. Steve Harvey's show was just canceled, and I noticed that Steve Harvey usually was the lead-in for Ellen DeGeneres. So it's just an interesting point. He's being replaced by, I believe, Kelly Clarkson from American Idol and The Voice.
That's part of #MeToo.
Yeah.
See, let me tell you about Ellen DeGeneres. We were both on KNBC4 New York, which at that time was the biggest broadcast TV station in America. All right.
All right.
So I was hitting 4.8, 5.7, 6.3 in the ratings. And at that point in time, she was doing 0.07, not even a 10th of a percent, 0.14, 0.43. And they asked me, would I please do them a favor and for 2 days go on Ellen's show as a guest, because she came on right after me and they did not like the fact that the ratings dropped off so much. It was causing them problems with the commercial advertisements. So I went on there. She was nasty. She had temperature up in the 80s. Everybody was sweating. She was rude to everybody, including to me. I told her to go drop dead.
So you met her.
Walked off the set. I'm doing you a favor. They brought me back, and it was just total animosity the whole time.
So you met her.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Did I give you permission to zip your robe up? Who are you to give me permission to zip my robe up?
Wow.
That kind of thing.
She's from here too, by the way.
Well, yeah, and I didn't like her. And she was always talking about stuff. She was always doing stuff like her guests are in there and she's looking down at their neckline. Oh, those are some nice girls. Yeah. One time out where I live, she used to come out there to shop. She and her wife tried to hit on my wife.
What'd your wife say?
He told them to go to hell. But,
I'm still wondering, Judge, what happened to that girl that came up to you 30 years later and said, you don't remember we had sex, did you?
Well, she didn't say that at first. She told me later. Oh. Actually, she slapped it, and I'm not going to say who slapped me, and I'm not going to say what happened. I didn't mind it. It didn't hurt. But she hurt her hand doing it, but I just said, man, you can't provoke me. Go ahead, bam. But I'm sorry. I apologize. It wasn't 30 years ago. It was like 15. I said, hey, it's reality.
Well, you never forget somebody special, I guess.
And then see something that women hate. They keep saying men and women are the same. We're not. They can't get pregnant by one guy at a time. Men can impregnate more than one woman at a time. And they had this thing about harems, reglos, multiple wives, right?
Right.
And one of the things was that society said, this is a successful man. If this successful man in our tribe has more children than the ordinary guy does, that will be more people that can help our tribe prosper.
Mm-hmm.
So the chieftain had a harem, and it was also political. He established alliances because it's extended family. So you got one group trying to go about killing the other group. Well, instead of fighting, you have leaders, they have their children get together so everybody becomes an extended family. All right, fine. So you've got the concept of the alpha male, who is what? A herd bull equivalent. So how many cows does a herd bull have versus how many bulls does a cow have? That's crude, but that's what the equation is.
Right.
So they don't get it. There's a joke that says, and they hate this, the feminist bunch. There's a young bull talking to his daddy, the herd bull, and they're standing on the side of a hill looking at all of these cows in the herd. And he said, Dad, is it true that when you retire, I become the herd bull? He said, yes, son. If you're worthy, you'll become the herd bull. He said, all of those cows down there, are they yours? He said, yes, son. He said, Dad, will those become my cows? He said, yes, son, they will. He said, how about now? He said, well, you're getting old enough. I guess maybe I can start letting you have a little bit more leeway in what you do. He said, Dad, can we run down and go deal with all those cows? He said, no, we'll just walk down and do it. You know, that's the joke. No need to run. So
Yeah.
women can't get that, but some do. It's like I've had conversations with women that are arguing. I was married at the time, and they're telling my wife, so-and-so, can we share him? You know, you complain about you don't feel like being bothered, but we don't have a man, and he's taking care of a lot of business, so maybe you can share him. You see, some of this statistic about so few men going to high school and graduating and college and graduating and grad school and graduating or working, it's creating a situation that re-legitimizes the harem, because you have fewer men that are doing something and many women that are seeking a man that's doing something, but they can't find one. So the solution, let's go back to the old way, they can share. You know, the Holy Quran says 4 wives and unlimited concubines to the extent that you can afford. Now, I'm not going to advocate somebody go out and do that. That's breaking the law here. But, I mean, it is a thought. You know, so if you got it, you're doing it, you're the herd bull. So when you have a politician or somebody who's got great charisma because he is an alpha male type, you can expect that person to be an alpha male. And alpha males are essentially herd bulls. Right. They were the chieftains, the potentates, the sultans, the kings who had a harem. So they have an unofficial harem. And that just goes with the territory. Every single president, except maybe Jimmy Carter, had outside women, you know, outside women. Some of them more notorious.
JFK had a list. Yeah, JFK was bringing women into the White House. He was even his secretary, I think, talked about their sexual relationship, said she never kissed him. He just said, come on in the bed, and that was it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but, you know, I've met 2 of Johnson's children he had while he was president, and it wasn't with Mamie, or it wasn't with his wife.
Right.
You know.
Madeline Brown.
One of the women was Marie Brown, and the other one was the White House secretary. That version of LBJ looked just like him. He just had a little coffee tint. The other one that was by white Marie Brown looked exactly like him. Okay, so Eisenhower's mistress wrote a book. He acknowledged it. Truman had a mistress.
FDR
had 2 of them known because they got bullet holes put in their coattails during assassination attempts.
Oh, wow.
Which they don't talk about too much. Truman, some Puerto Ricans tried to assassinate him. They were for Puerto Rican liberty, and he was walking into his favorite cafe across the street from the White House, and his lady friend was with him, mistress, and 2 bullets got put in her coattail when they tried to assassinate Truman. They were unsuccessful, but it is that. And all while Eisenhower was in Europe, his commander-in-chief, his chauffeur was his mistress. She was a former fashion model from England. And I'm not surprising. It's come to light that his wife, Mamie, used to send him telegrams. Like one of them stands out, they published. This is June 8th, 1944. He's a commander-in-chief of the Allied armies, just led the largest invasion in human history on June 6th. All of this hell going on, and she sends him a nasty telegram about I've seen you in the newsreels just because you lead the damn invasion. Why didn't you call me up and tell me what color paint you wanted me to paint the new house? Like, you lost your mind. But, that was a telegram. She was neurotic. So it is what it is.
Right.
And there is a resentment that some men have that attraction, because I think one of the problems is that some women that don't like the idea find themselves attracted to that kind of man, and they resent it. So they demonize that which they can't resist.
Right.
But I mean, all of that's amateur psychology, but I know it's unpopular, but there's some reality. We are essentially the same creature that was roaming around in the Ice Age and fighting off saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, and large bear, and lions, and wolves, and all kinds of other stuff. But we prevailed. Mm-hmm. And now everything on the planet we have to protect so we don't kill it off.
Right. Right. Do you feel, just to get back with the law thing, what you're saying and tying that in with the alpha males, I was just noticing, especially this year, and I thought about it, that you had, I believe it was O.J. Simpson. He was paroled, if I'm not mistaken, if it was last year or early part of this year. But they televised his parole hearing live on television, something I've never seen before. And then you have the Bill Cosby case, and then they asked O.J. actually what he thought about Bill Cosby. It seems like it's kind of a bookend, where at the beginning they were trying to get O.J., and then now they got Bill Cosby, someone who was higher up that, at one point he was America's favorite father, that they called him, but he didn't call himself that. And O.J. was this big black athlete, black man who married this white woman and is accused of a double murder. And so it almost seems like it's symbolic. Do you think that
there's a lot to it. And then the other thing too is actually to show you the danger of accepting unfounded allegations. A lot of the reason America has that opinion of O.J. is due to one person.
Nancy Grace.
She was the only reporter that was covering it. She was new, and she wanted to cement her position in Hollywood, and she came up with all of these misleading reports. The defendant is not going to be able to overcome the devastating evidence against him. That's what the public heard. If you watch the trial, which I recorded, and you see what was going on as a defense lawyer or as a judge, you'd say, hell, it doesn't get any better for the defense than that. What do you mean devastating against him?
Right.
Couldn't get any better for him. So, I mean, it was just that after that, day after day, and everybody was listening to her singular report. Nobody else was down there. I talked to the court person, some of the judges that I'd recruited to law school. I had no connection with them. So they just said, Joe, what happened? She'd come down here at the end of everything and ask what happened, and then write up a report and speak it like she was sitting through the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the power for the press. See, and the other thing too is, let's talk about fairness. They got on Johnny Cochran for supposedly raising the race card to get the jurors to accept that because of a race animus, LAPD was lying about this case and attempted to plant evidence. Well, they keep harping on that even today. But what they don't deal with is four of the chief detectives in the OJ case got prosecuted and put in jail after the Rampart scandal out in LA. That's a precinct for LAPD, when they had to let 128 people out of the penitentiary system because these four detectives had participated in planting false evidence against them. So, see, they didn't even cover that. They didn't get an honest appraisal of the evidence, like, that thing about if it does not fit, you must acquit. Well, the glove hand tri-size tracing showed that this was a size L glove. This is from the maker of the glove. I talked to him personally. And see, The problem is that OJ had a size double XL.
Right.
Furman had a size L, which matched that glove. Furman found the glove. Remember, Furman finds the bloody socks at the foot of the bed.
Right.
And then the interesting thing about that was so telling is they have what they call a security squad that goes in before crime scene for LAPD when they've got an upscale situation, so that they can verify if somebody's saying they stole some stuff from my house, which, by the way, was the subject of that thing with the burglary charge he did time on, because he was trying to get his stuff back that got stolen from his house by LAPD. Well, they had the security camera, and it's reading at the top 114, and you can see the foot of the bed, no socks. And in the intervening time, that camera has sound on it. You can hear them say, "Who are you?" And then they pan up, and there's Furman. And then they tell him he's got to leave. And then a little while later, Detective Furman, "Why are you in the bedroom?" And they pan up, you can see Furman standing right there at the foot of the bed. "Well, sir, you have to leave, or we'll have to escort you out." And then at 1:45, 1:50, he doesn't know that this area has been taped. Then you have crime scene, and what do they have? Right there, the bloody socks at the foot of the bed where you've seen Furman standing. After you've seen there no socks. And Furman's the one that supposedly discovers them. So you say, oh, the fix is in.
Mm-hmm. You know, another thing too, I'm sorry, Judge, but just to say this, you know, a lot of Black Americans during that time, I can remember, especially, I was 8, we were watching, you know, that had a chance to watch that trial. And one of the things too that came out when you talk about the socks, I remember, was that, and Johnny Cochran pointed this out, is that when you looked at the blood in the sock that they said they had, it went through one heel and the other as if someone poured it, instead of it like splattering where you would see a foot would be in there. It was the same symmetric size on both sides.
Well, yeah. And see, what that implicates is that somebody screwed up a blood sample. A good friend of mine got called by the state as a witness on the subject of knife killing. He's a very smart man, and he observed, as he conveys to me, he said, well, when they showed me the scene, the first thing I'm looking at is there are 2 sets of prints in the blood. And one set was somebody with a size 10 and a half shoe, and the other one was somebody with a size 9, and OJ wore a size 12.
Mm-hmm.
And also his opinion as a professional, never mind what that means, but he has a certain level of expertise. Let's just say that some of his students were on the Bin Laden raid. He said that it was impossible for one man to do what was described as having been done to Goldman and Nicole. He said it took at least 2 men, and there in the blood are the tracks of the 2 people. He said the other thing is to do a job like this, standard drill, and this is where it gets kind of crazy. He said the standard drill is to undress down to some dark underwear, because you will get blood stains that will be very conspicuous on your clothing. So you take your clothes off, you put them to the side, you're in your underwear, you pull it off. Then after you wipe down as much as you can, you put your clothes back on so they're not showing on the outside. He said the other thing is if somebody did that, he wasn't getting on an airplane because of the blood that would have been involved. It would take you hours to get it off.
Right.
The other thing was that here, they didn't tell you this, Nancy Grace didn't bring it out because she was too squeamish to look at it. Their throats were slit from ear to ear, and somebody had reached in with a pair of pliers and pulled their tongues out of the incision. That's called a Colombian necktie. And also, each of them had one fatal wound without any other stab wounds, which was a knife blow struck by a left-handed person that severed the aorta and wrecked the 2 top chambers of the heart on Goldman and Nicole. So that's an expert. Usually what happens is you stab somebody and nothing happens. Stab them again, even through the heart, nothing happens. It's not like the movies, so amateurs stab 25, 30 times before they start seeing some results. But the pro says, okay, I killed them. It'll take a little while, so let's cut their throats. And so we send the message. You noticed in there that they had the two witnesses in the federal witness protection program who were real live gangsters.
Right, the Fiato brothers. In fact, one of them was dating Nicole's sister.
Yeah, and that killing was a message to them to be quiet.
Right, right.
So, and then there's an interesting thing, too, to back that up. The testimony of the expert witness on DNA who taught the other two witnesses as students and said they weren't good students. He testified that there was some peculiar nature about the blood samples, and that what they analyzed trying to put OJ in it was not even a close match, but it was not a match for what they did have. So what he said is that what he excluded was the blood samples they said they got from the scene that had traces of the preservative that LAPD routinely adds to blood samples when they want to analyze it. So he said excluding that, the other blood samples were interesting because somebody got accidentally cut in the process of doing them in, and he contributed a blood sample, but it did not exclude 96,000 other people in the LA County area. And the donor of that blood sample was from either, I found interesting, from either the northeast section of the Mediterranean or from Sicily. And you got two mobsters in custody and somebody that nicked themselves when they were doing the cutting, is from Sicily. What are we talking about here?
Right. Well, interesting, Judge, too, is several other people that were associated with Ron and Nicole, Michael Nigg, Brett Cantor, they died under mysterious, and a few others, they died under mysterious circumstances as well. I believe Brett Cantor was stabbed a year prior to Nicole and Ron were murdered. And I believe Brett Cantor was Ron Goldman's roommate of some kind or best friend. So I found that interesting. I also found interesting that what you're saying about the blood preservatives, I believe you're talking about EDTA. My mom even talked about that. Marsha Clark tried to say, well, that in the O.J. Simpson documentary, that came from soap powder when he was washing his clothes, and that couldn't have been possible for the amount that they had. No, you don't even have that in your blood. No,
it was fake. In fact, I talked to several judges sitting on the trial, so they had no proof. And Darden and Clark were just embarrassments to the profession. I thought they were extremely unprofessional. Speaking of somebody I thought was disgustingly unprofessional, and I think she did not do the feminist cause any good, was that judge who presided over the case involving OJ trying to take his property back up in Vegas. That incompetent was actually sipping on a 7-Eleven Slurpee.
Right.
Slurpee with her back turned to everybody while they were trying to put in testimony. She did not even give the semblance of the necessary decorum and respect. And you see, that just gets into every guy that says women shouldn't do that. It's like, look at what she did. She couldn't even act with restraint. She had to let her emotions about the OJ versus Nicole Simpson, Rod Goldman thing interject itself to control her conduct, which was inappropriate. I'm not saying all women are like that, but I'm just saying she didn't uphold the cause.
Right. You see, I remember that. It was interesting, too. Carl Douglas pointed this out, is that same day of OJ's sentencing was the very same day anniversary of his not guilty verdict in 1995.
Yeah, they planned it that way.
Right. It wasn't a coincidence. And even with Bill Cosby, even with Bill Cosby, I don't know if you know this, but this past week was the anniversary, that Monday was the anniversary of A Different World, and the anniversary on September 20th of The Cosby Show that debuted 34 years ago.
Yeah. See, they do that, and they think they're slick about it. It's very, very interesting.
Right.
So what are you doing?
Yeah. I, it's deep, man. The stuff that they've got going on. When you talked about the drugs too, and I know you got, I'll be winding down a little bit, but I was reading, since we're talking about Cosby, Paul Mooney's autobiography, "White is the New Black," and he talked about how he met Richard Pryor and how Richard Pryor even idolized Bill Cosby. And in fact, Richard Pryor was doing all Bill Cosby jokes when he started out early in the 60s. And when Flip Wilson debuted in 1970, Richard Pryor used to write and be a guest star on Flip Wilson's show along with George Carlin. And I read that Flip and Richard were very close. In fact, Richard's bodyguard, I believe, is Flip Wilson's first cousin. And what's interesting is they stopped being friends, from what Paul Mooney said, when Richard stole Flip's drug mule, his drug girl. So all of that stuff was going on during Hollywood in the night, in the 70s, and George, doing drugs, and I'm sure they had a lot of girls around them. So being Bill Cosby, did he really have to, drop?
Well, look.
Yeah.
Let me say something about that. I don't mean to cut you off.
That's okay.
But I went to some of those parties when I come back on vacation to LA, and I'd been to those parties before I left LA. I'm from LA. And you would get this type that would show up. They'd take the coats off if they had a coat, and they would be totally see-through at the top. No pockets, no bra. You could see everything. And then they would head to the coke if there was coke in the place. They would go get the herb, walk around to see who had any, if anybody, in these big Hollywood parties, or at some big house party. And they would, in 30 minutes, they'd have the top off, so they're going around, topless. And some of them, within an hour, they're down to panties. And then you go to the bathroom, and then they're giving somebody a head job. You come down the hallway, and they pop out of a closet holding somebody's hand, and they're naked with them doing something. Right. Or you go in to get your coat or get something out of your coat so you can write down a phone number. And they're on the bed doing somebody. So then, a week later or 4 days later, the same group is giving another party. There they are again. And then you see them on the cover of Vanity Fair magazine as somebody complaining against Cosby, like, oh, give me a break. Like nobody saw you doing what you were doing but you.
Right.
Now, I'm all for, protecting women from getting taken advantage of. Right. But let's be candid. Sometimes all this stuff that you're hearing is gold diggers' remorse. So if it happened, and they're talking about it kept me from trying to be in the industry. That is a poisonous, sleazy industry, Hollywood. It's a cesspool. Some places in it are sumps in a cesspool. But the bottom line is you don't have to be in it. You can get yourself a real job in the real world and do something constructive. But they chose to do that. Some of them had a lack of talent, and what they decided to do is, wow, we whoopee, let's jumpstart this and cut some corners, and we can do some sexual favors. And they just didn't get paid the way they thought they were going to get paid. And like another woman wrote, she said, I'm a singer, I'm an actress, I'm successful. He just said the game is like the pimp game. You don't do nothing until you get paid. Said if you get the contract, you get the part, you don't get cut, and you make part of the production, then yeah, you might want to do something for the next go around, but
Right.
I laughed at it, but it's true.
Right. Some of the accusations I was just listening to, like I know that Beverly Johnson, she accused Cosby, but you haven't heard too much from her. And Whoopi Goldberg was giving her the business when she was on The View, asking straight questions. But Beverly Johnson, I don't think could even answer. And you notice they haven't really talked to her too much.
Well, did you hear what she had to say? No. I heard that exchange Whoopi did.
Yes, I did.
And Whoopi said, well, wait a minute. He didn't have sex with you? No. So you're saying that you got too high and he gave you a taxi, took you downstairs on the elevator, put you in the taxi, paid the cab, and sent you home. Well, what did he do? Well, he got me high. He was trying to take advantage of me. And when you got high, he took you down and put you in a cab.
Right.
What do you complain? That was just bull. She was trying to do that. I'm on the board. And I bet you Gloria already, in fact, I'm sure she had talked to her, trying to persuade her. She got in there and got to thinking about what she was actually being put up to.
Well, Whoopi too, originally she was defending Bill until I guess ABC talked to her, and then she kind of got on, Bill, you got some explaining to do. I'll never forget that.
Well, let me put it this way. The employment is lucrative. They pay you a lot of money for doing essentially little. And they threaten you. I always told them to go F off or go to hell, go ahead and fire me. Eventually it was, we want you to take this IOU for the money that we owe you. Oh, hell no, not CBS, you lost your mind. So we just parted ways. It was 15 years, move on to something else. And I'm going through a divorce situation anyway, so I just said, what the devil. Let her go take, a retired man, and she won't get much to walk out of this on, so which she didn't. So it was what it was. Now it's time for a comeback if they'll haven't blackballed me too much, because quite frankly, they do not like straight black men in Hollywood. We're on the bottom of everybody's totem pole.
Right.
One of the most insulting letters I've ever got in my life, the same year that the show started, 2.5 months after it started, was from a group that identified themselves as 23 Proud Lesbians. And they claimed that they were resentful of being assigned to work for a straight black male when there were so many fine gay black men to work for or work with. They didn't like my voice. They said I squinted. They said they resented me opening doors and pulling out chairs, and my courtesy was just the front to maintain the male image of power to exploit women. It was absolutely ridiculous. So what wound up happening is everybody got called over to human resources. I just said, I got something better to do. They said, thank you. They have time. Where is he going? Well, about his business. The rest of you are going to get coached in, harassing and discriminating against the judge. He's the star of the show, and you're guilty of doing wrong under EEOC Title VII law to him.
Right. Yeah.
So that went on over and over and over again. Like, do we have to do this again? And by the way, young man, how long have you been out of law school? A year and 6 months? Well, okay, fine. You need to do your research. By the way, that's not what the law is on Title VII. You've already done a presentation 2 years ago. Go check your records and you show that again. I'm not going to sign off on that. That's not even the law. Well, I said, excuse me, I work for EEOC and I keep up on it, so that's not the law. Are you going to argue with somebody who's been doing this for 30-some years and you are a junior flip rookie? Go check it out. So they checked it out and they wound up showing the original presentation that made all these executives go on, and it was 2 hours going through it.
Mm-hmm.
So was what it was. But, I feel sorry for any woman that's actually been done wrong. But I am also a person who insists on being forthright. If something's been done wrong to you, either come forward and say something about it or shut up. If they come and solicit it from you with knowledge that there may be something wrong, like they did with Anita Hill, see, that's the difference. She didn't volunteer this. They sought it out. What She told me personally was, when it was just the Second Circuit, she said, no, never mind, I don't have anything to say. When they came in and asked her about the Supreme Court, she said, look, I got out of law school, wanted to help, and I wanted to deal with my people through EEOC, and I found out I was working for somebody that was a hatchet man to destroy it. She said it wasn't about his sexual activities. It was about what he was doing that showed he wasn't qualified to be on the court because he was so ignorant of the law. He said that was the context in what I did. And, you know, they're sitting here, and this was years ago when I talked to her. She said they're trying to turn it into this feminist sexual thing.
Right. So she was really a hero trying to keep him off because he was fucking ignorant. Excuse my language. That's
Excuse me. You become a Second Circuit appellate judge, and the first time you ever set foot in the courtroom is to get sworn in for that position.
Right.
What kind of qualification is that? You've never had a client or a case?
Yeah.
You said, you know, somebody can overturn that, but then putting you on the Supreme Court with that level, it's like, and, you know, it's just, where do we go with this? But it was a trend. We had a judge here in Western Tennessee it's like her husband went through law school. She helped put him through law school, had the children, and then when he graduated, he was the darling of the Republican Party. So she goes to law school, and she graduates from law school at 29 years old. So she takes the bar, and while she's waiting on the bar, you know, it comes back, she's passed. A couple of weeks after it's passed, she turns 30. Now, 30 is the minimum age you can be to be a state judge. So she's sworn into the bar, and 4 days later, the governor appoints her a circuit court judge. So when she walks in to be sworn in, you know, she got sworn in by another judge. And when she walks into the courtroom, that's the first time she's ever set foot in the courtroom. And she's a judge where there's unlimited jurisdiction. There was a jury trial in there, and she didn't know how many challenges each side was supposed to get. So she just said, well, each side can take as many as they want, which is ridiculous. So guess what? Ronald Reagan decides to appoint her as a federal judge. She hadn't even been out of law school a year and a half.
Yeah.
So she's sitting up there on the bench, and the most unadvised, unsophisticated, unknowledgeable person in the courtroom is the judge. That's chaos. And it was. But after 30-some years, 25-some years, she learned, I guess, what she should have learned before she got on. And they put her on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Wow.
So
it's all about who you know.
So they put a guy on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals from Mississippi. One of the most ridiculous fools I've ever dealt with. You know what he did when he was a prosecutor? He actually indicted 7 people for first-degree murder, criminal attempt to wit first-degree murder. You know what the method of murder was supposed to be?
What was that?
Voodoo spells.
Tell me a grand jury didn't accept that.
They did accept that. It was Mississippi. So when the appellate court got it, they said, oh, get the devil out of here. You can't prosecute anybody for voodoo spells, even if they did it.
That's terrible. Yeah.
But he was on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and what he did, one time was really crazy. His son wanted to run for congressman, so there was a big to-do about gerrymandering so you could get a conservative congressman in and disenfranchise the blacks. He sits there and he votes on the case that deals with his own son. Now, those are some real horrors in the judicial system. They got a juvenile court judge they had down here for 35 years in Memphis. He was a spider. He had a huge empire. He kept expanding his jurisdiction because one of his henchmen was on the state court of the judiciary, but only in this county was he allowed to do that. And guess what? The Supreme Court had forbade him 10 years into his 40-year service to hear cases. So for 30 years, he can't hear cases. You know why? Because he only had a 6th grade education. That's as far as he went before he dropped out. He didn't have the knowledge to be able to deal with what lawyers were talking about because he couldn't read well enough.
Oh.
So the Supreme Court forbade him to hear cases. So he's a judge, so he hires all these lawyers to act for him. And he sets up this private business to run the juvenile court for profit. And he blackmailed the hell out of everybody. So they just sort of said, this is ridiculous, but we don't know what to do about it. So this person was a judge from 1963 to 2006, and he couldn't even hear cases. He got grandfathered in because now, since 1968, 50 years ago, you have to be a lawyer to be a judge. Before that, you didn't have to be. He had run vice squad for the police department, and he knew everybody's dark secrets. So he got the appointment. He declared over and over again, my job is to keep the niggers on the bottom and to set up a coalition between poor Negro females on welfare and rich white folks so we can run the county the way it's supposed to be run. That's what he said. The first time I appeared before him in 1974, when he could still hear cases, I had 5 clients. He called me the N-word. He thought I was one of them instead of their lawyer. We had it. Boy, I went off. But
did he hold you in contempt when you went off?
He backed down on it because he knew he couldn't find me but $10. And I got that resolved on appeal several doggone times. I don't know what happened this last time when I walked in. I had a woman who was done grievously wrong. Their record was screwed up. They violated every procedure. They had an arrest warrant out for this woman with no affidavit to back it up. And nobody knew who signed it because there was a rubber stamp. It had expired and they didn't have damn jurisdiction. Right. And I tell this guy that this woman's got a $150,000 job this needs to be cleared up on. And he tells me he's got a golf tee time, so he can't be bothered with it. So I went off on it. I ultimately got what my client needed, but the accusation, to show you what it's about, is she was in her mid-50s. She was a professional woman. She was going to get paid $150,000 a year for this gig, and she had a background check. We found this warrant. What the accusation was is somebody who had stalked her 30 years beforehand was claiming that she was the mother of his daughter. Now, guess what? She'd never had a daughter. She had one son, only child, who was a college graduate, and she'd been married most of that time. So she and her husband had one boy, that's it. So they arrest her because somebody walked in off the street and said, she's the mother of my daughter.
Yeah,
no name given, no birth certificate supplied, no date given, no place given, and he hasn't paid child support or been brought down on it. Now, that's not grounds to arrest somebody in anyone's bloody state.
No. Yeah.
So he tells me I got a golf tee time I got to get to. And that wasn't the judge, by the way. That was one of these lawyers that this one who had a 6th grade education hired to do what he couldn't do.
He was an ad hoc.
No, they call them magistrates. And see, okay. I even had ruled when I was on the bench that was unconstitutional under Tennessee law, because one bloody doggone thing that was apparent is there are 56 judges, chancellors, and criminal court judges in Shelby County, all right? To have a referee or a magistrate that can perform in front of those 56 judges, it has to be unanimous. Any one judge can blackball a referee. But this guy with a 6th grade education gets to hire his own cadre of 8 referees or magistrates without anybody to check on him, who are exercising power that he had acquired that belonged to circuit, chancery, and criminal court. Now, something's wrong with that picture.
Yeah.
You get somebody who isn't even qualified to pick somebody who's going to come in and do what he's supposed to do, and they don't have to match the standards that every other referee and judge can require of every other referee and magistrate can be required to adhere to in order to perform for a real live qualified judge. And then the other thing is there's a state law that says it is absolutely mandatory that any judicial officer who qualifies for a non-judicial position on the ballot must immediately resign. He ran for mayor, he qualified, and instead of resigning, he claimed since he was a non-lawyer, it didn't apply to him. So for everything past that point, which was 1978, he wasn't supposed to be on the bench to do anything anyway. So all of this stuff was illegal.
Yeah, but the people allowed it.
People didn't exactly allow it. It's just like we found, for example, a whole list of somebody got a surprise appointment to fulfill the now vacant position for court clerk down there about 18 years ago. And when the new guy got down there after getting the sheriff's department to seize the records they were trying to take out and destroy, we discovered this whole long list of elected officials who had 1, 2, 3, 4, in one case, 18 outside children through juvenile court who were getting blackmailed to do what everybody wanted them to do. Not everybody, but what they wanted them to do. It was atrocious. And they had $8.3 million of taxpayers' money they had managed to put in a sequestered, non-interest bearing account that they were using as collateral to allow certain select people to use the taxpayers' money as collateral and security to get home loans, car loans, and to finance campaigns. That sums up to $25 million now. So the Tea Party gets, and certain other limit people, Democrats who are in bed with them, they get to use the slush fund down there, taxpayers' money, $25 million to secure campaign finance. It's a racket.
Yeah, it's a hustle. Judge.
But anyway, it is what it is. So that's just, the system needs some improvement. But one of the things that's going on bad in the system is every now and then you get a spark where there's somebody who's actually doing what they're supposed to do and they're standing up for wrong. Well, what they do is go behind the scenes and go through these judicial committees or disciplinary committees. And like one good brother, for example, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, he got elected by the community to do something about it. In 5 consecutive trials, the DA excluded every single black person. And the defense was hollering bats and bats, and this is improper because there's no legitimate reason to excuse the black people. So after it happened for trial 5, he just said, "Excuse me," and dismissed the jury panel and castigated the prosecutor for being a racist. So what was the thing? Did they take action against the prosecutor, which they would have done had he been black and been called anti-white? No. They suspended the judge indefinitely without pay for 6 months. And he couldn't practice law either. So he was without income until he issued a public apology. And then they suspended him for 4 more months.
They did that to Judge Olo Stevens.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
They tried it with me too. That's what they do. See, I have to deal with this stuff. They listen to what I say on the radio. And then somebody files a complaint, so they want me to answer it. So my law license is in medical disability status, so they keep wanting me to produce medical records so they can proceed. So I just may tell them to go drop dead. I surrender the license. I don't need it. I'm over 70. I'm not going to practice law, but I mean, it's just what they do. You're in a position to help, and when you do, then they want to come back on you and sneak around the corner and be slimy about it.
Yeah.
Somebody might report this stuff too.
Well, they can report what they want. It's about freedom of speech. We want the truth.
So that's what I intend to deliver.
Right. Freedom of speech. Yeah. Yeah.
But you see, uh, it's like if the wrong person hears me saying this, they'll write a letter to the state bar in Tennessee saying I badmouth the state judiciary. So they'll ask me to explain it. And I say, medical disability status, my law license inactive. This thing, you can't do anything with it. And then they'll go, oh, well, you answer or we will reinstate it. I don't want to reinstate it. So, we go back and forth on that.
Right.
So it's like the depths to which people will sink these days to keep the public from exercising their rights is kind of bad. Used to be, let's just do it to them straight up front. But when they get a lawyer, let's get the lawyers cowed so they won't go really do what they ought to do because they'll be worried about retaliation in the future, which is a very bad thing all the way around.
Yes, sir. Judge, I do want to say before closing, what you mentioned about the juries in dealing with that racist DA. There were even allegations too in the Cosby case about the lack of blacks in the jury, and a prosecutor, I believe it was the black female prosecutor, that said something along the effects that we have enough black jurors, or you have enough to the defense, to which the defense objected, but I don't believe anything had happened at that time with regards to, the judge admonishing the prosecution.
Yeah, I agree with you. And professionally, I think the judge handled it poorly. Is that woman standing up in front of the jury when she wasn't even a witness? I recognize you. You know who I am. Like, what is this? Or that woman running around topless with all these accusations, lipstick on her bare breast and back. And they got her on TV, and the jurors were looking out the window to look at this. So that report of one juror talking to his brother and discussing, don't forget that book deal you signed on this. Like all of that that's out of control. Too many outbursts in the courtroom.
Right. I was talking about that even on the radio show yesterday, and explaining to people it's about what the process did to Bill Cosby that was unfair, and frankly it violated so many constitutional rights.
I see. Look, if Cosby really did wrong, he did wrong. But what I've heard has another explanation, but it requires sophistication and exposure to really get it. I look at the historical record of this country, and what do you do when you want to get rid of a black man? You go after him alleging some kind of sexual impropriety with some kind of white person or somebody perceived as white, all right?
Right.
One of the things they did that was really weird is when they took this woman, and when they first started showing her, they put on dark makeup so she would look black. And then as it went along, you could see the pictures. She looked very white as she did beforehand. Why did they put the dark makeup on?
Trying to get black women on their side. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking about Lily Bernard.
Yeah. See, that's this whole thing. And you bring somebody in from 49 years ago to say, essentially, he gave me some drugs. 49 years ago at the time would have been 1968. That was straight up and down free sex, drugs, and rock and roll. There weren't too many black celebrities anyway, and the ones that were getting a whole lot of blank because it was being thrown at them.
Yeah.
So I don't buy somebody waiting 50 years before they come forward with something. I don't care what. It's like I tell other people, if you got this kind of wrong on somebody as a citizen, you got a duty to come forward when it happens. If you don't, they got a concept in civil law. It's called latches. what that means is even if there's no statute of limitations, it's kind of like, come on. You should, if something was really wrong enough to complain about it, you should have come forward long ago. You waited too long. So everybody's got to get on with their lives. You made this choice. You live with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Judge, I appreciate the time and knowledge. Is there something you want to say with everybody before we go?
Well, yeah, just we have our laws and they have a reason for existing. The other thing I would offer is stay on top of it so you can ensure that they got applied even-handedly, because even if they were technically applied, they may not have been applied in spirit, and we don't want that.
Right.
Now, I'm not going to Cosby's guilt or innocence. I'm just concerned that as a professional, some of the things that I saw just were inappropriate. As a man, I am alarmed by this effort by some to turn this whole thing into an anti-man cause, which I think is going to be a dead end because they won't win that battle. We don't want men to reciprocate by having a war against women. Now, I doubt men are going to do that because most men like women. And the fact of the matter is most women like men. So we don't need a few little isolated folk that don't like the opposite sex to be able to engineer a situation where the two sexes are at each other's throats. We need men and women to have families, and we need men and women for the next generation. So we should be working together rather than letting somebody put our posture at odds with each other. That is a no-win situation.
Amen. I agree. Well, Judge, I appreciate this. We have to do this again. This has been Gavin Richard Presents, and I've been interviewing the great Judge Joe Brown. Thank you, Judge.
One little last thing. You
Sure.
can catch me on Twitter at Judge Joe Brown TV. That's me, even though I don't have a blue tick. At Judge Joe Brown TV.
Yeah, you
right.
follow, and I follow you. You follow me back too on there. We tweet each other often. Yeah, as a matter of fact, Judge, just before we go, are you planning to come back to TV?
I will keep my mouth shut. Don't count your chickens until the eggs hatch, but I got something in the works. So let's see what happens. Right. Meanwhile, you can catch 2 hours of reruns every morning if you got Xfinity. I know they carry Bounce TV, and where you can get Bounce TV, I'm on in the morning, 2 hours a day, every day of the week, or Monday through Friday, rather. So you can catch me. There's 15 years worth of stuff. Some of it's good.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Thank you, Judge. God bless.
Thank you, young man.
All right. Peace.